For 40 years, Mary believed the painful truth. Her daughter hadn't survived birth. She grieved, she moved on, or so she thought. But one night, the phone rings. A stranger's voice shatters everything. "Your daughter is alive." Shocked, Mary digs into the past, uncovering a horrifying secret. Someone stole her baby. But as she gets closer to the truth, powerful forces try to silence her. What really happened that night? And will Mary find her daughter before it's too late? Want to know what happens next? Watch till the end and don't miss this shocking story. Comment where you're watching from. The night was quiet. Mary sat in her favorite armchair, absent-mindedly twisting her wedding ring, a habit she had carried for years. The clock read 9:37 p.m., and her only company was the distant hum of the television and the rustling of trees. Outside, then the phone rang. She hesitated before answering. Lately, most calls were from unknown numbers, telemarketers or scams. But something about this one made her heart race. "Hello?" Her voice came out weaker than she expected. On the other end, a woman took a deep breath before speaking. "Mary, I know this is going to sound strange, but please hear me. Out. My name is Laura. I have information about your daughter." Mary's chest tightened. The air seemed to vanish from her lungs. "My daughter." Her voice trembled. "You must be mistaken. My daughter. She didn't survive." Silence. "I know what they told you, but it's not true. Your daughter is alive." Mary felt the world spin around her. Laura's voice continued, now more urgent. "Please, I have proof. I only found out recently, and I know how shocking this must be for you, but someone lied to you." The phone almost slipped from her sweaty hands. She wanted to hang up. She wanted to believe this was some cruel mistake. But then Laura said a name Mary hadn't heard in decades. "Dr. Campbell. He was there that night, wasn't he?" Mary's stomach churned. How did she know that? Dr. Campbell was the obstetrician who held her hand through the delivery, the one who had given her the devastating news. How do you know that?" she whispered. "I have a document, a hospital record. I can send it to you right now. Please look at it and tell me if you recognize it." A beep sounded on Mary's phone, a new message. With trembling hands, she opened the attachment, and there, staring back at her, was Dr. Campbell's unmistakable handwriting. An official hospital document. But what made her heart stop was the text in the bottom corner. "Newborn transfer confidential." Her world shattered. Mary's hands trembled as she stared at the words on the screen. Newborn transfer confidential. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was this some kind of mistake, a cruel joke? But deep inside, something told her it wasn't. She swallowed hard and brought the phone back to her ear. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been looking into something for a long time," Laura said. "My own past never made sense. I grew up knowing I was adopted, but my records were sealed. When I finally got access to some of them, I found inconsistencies, missing papers, dates that didn't match. Then I found this." Mary's heart pounded. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I believe you're my mother," Mary gasped. Her grip on the phone tightened. No, that's impossible. My baby, she didn't make it. The doctor..." She stopped. The doctor. Dr. Campbell, the man she had trusted. The man who had looked her in the eyes and told her that her child was gone. Could he have lied? "Mary, please," Laura continued, her voice softer now. "I know this is a lot, but I have more. I have other documents. And if you let me, I can help you find the truth." Mary felt her breath shake. For 40 years, she had lived with the pain of loss. She had carried the weight of grief so deep that it had become a part of her. But now, for the first time, a tiny crack formed in the foundation of that grief. "Send me everything," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. Within seconds, more messages arrived, scanned copies of hospital records, adoption papers, names of people she didn't recognize. And then a photograph. Mary's hands trembled as she opened it. It was an old picture of a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket, her tiny face barely visible. But it wasn't the baby that made Mary's breath hitch. It was the bracelet on the infant's wrist. She knew that bracelet. Her mind flashed back to the day she gave birth, to the little silver band with her last name engraved on it. She had barely seen her daughter before they took her away, but she remembered that detail. It had been hers, and now it was here, in this photograph, on the wrist of a baby who was never supposed to have survived. Mary's world shifted beneath her. "Laura," her voice cracked, I think you might be right." Mary sat frozen, her phone still in her trembling hand. The past, which she had spent decades trying to accept, was now unraveling before her. If Laura was telling the truth, then everything, her grief, her loss, her entire understanding of that night, had been built on a lie. She needed to know more. "Laura, do you know who adopted you?" Mary asked, forcing herself to steady her voice. Laura hesitated. "Not exactly. My adoptive parents were loving, but they never talked much about my adoption. They always said it was handled through a private agency. But when I started digging, I realized that agency doesn't even exist anymore." Mary felt a chill run through her. "And the hospital, the one where I gave birth. It was shut down years ago," Laura said. "There were rumors, illegal adoptions, forged records, newborns taken from young mothers without their knowledge, but nothing was ever proven. No one was ever charged." Mary clenched her fists. "Is that what happened to me? Had she been just another mother whose child had been stolen and sold?" "I need to see you," she said suddenly. Laura exhaled. "I was hoping you'd say that." A silence hung between them, heavy with uncertainty, until Laura spoke again. "There's one more thing," she said. "Something I found while searching through old records." Mary's pulse quickened. "What is it?" There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. "The name of the doctor who signed my adoption papers." Mary already knew before Laura said, "Dr. James Campbell." The name felt like a dagger to the chest. 40 years ago she had trusted him. She had looked into his eyes searching for comfort, and instead he had stolen her child. The weight of it was too much. Mary pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to calm the storm inside her. "Mary, I need to find him," she said, her voice now firm. "I need to look him in the eye and ask him what he did to my daughter." But deep down she already knew, and something told her that the people who had covered up the truth for so long wouldn't let her uncover it. Without a fight, sleep was impossible. Mary lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind tangled in memories and unanswered questions. If Dr. Campbell had lied to her all those years ago, how many other mothers had suffered the same fate? And if Laura was truly her daughter, then where had she been all this time? By morning, Mary had made a decision. She wouldn't stop until she had the truth. Her first call was to an old friend, Linda Harper, a retired nurse who had worked at the same hospital where Mary had given birth. If anyone could help her, it was Linda. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Mary, it's been ages. How are you?" Mary swallowed hard. "Linda, I need your help. It's about the hospital, about my daughter." There was a long pause on the other end. "Mary, that place closed decades ago. Why bring it up now?" Mary gripped the phone tighter. "Because I think they lied to me. I think my baby was taken from me, and I need to know the truth." Silence. Then, in a hushed tone, Linda spoke. "Meet me at the park near my house." "An hour." Mary's heart pounded. Linda sounded nervous, almost afraid. That only made her more certain there was something to uncover. The park bench was old, its wooden slats worn from years of sun and rain. Linda sat with her back straight, her fingers gripping her purse tightly. "I shouldn't be talking about this," she said as Mary sat beside her. "But I always knew something wasn't right." Mary felt a lump form in her throat. "Tell me everything." Linda sighed, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. "I wasn't working the night you gave birth, but I remember the whispers, babies disappearing, records being altered. We knew something was going on, but no one dared to question it. And Dr. Campbell, he was in the middle of it all." Mary's chest tightened. "Why didn't anyone stop him?" Linda shook her head. Because he wasn't the only one. There were powerful people involved. Money was changing hands, and the mothers, most of them were young, scared, alone. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late. Mary's hands clenched into fists. "Do you know where he is now?" Linda hesitated. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper. "I found this a few years ago. He left medicine, but I heard he still does private work." Mary unfolded the note. It was an address. Her stomach churned. Dr. Campbell was still out there, and she was going to find him. Mary sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The address Linda had given her led to a small, nondescript house on the outskirts of town. Nothing about it stood out, just another aging home in a quiet neighborhood. But behind that door was the man who had stolen her daughter. She took a deep breath. The weight of 40 years pressed against her chest, but she forced herself to move. Stepping out of the car, she walked toward the door, her heart hammering with each step. She knocked. At first, there was no answer. Then, the sound of slow shuffling footsteps. The door creaked open just a crack, revealing a pair of tired, wary eyes, Dr. James Campbell. Mary's breath caught in her throat. He was older now, his hair thin and grey, his shoulders hunched with age. But the moment his gaze met hers, she saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition. Guilt. "Dr. Campbell," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. He hesitated, then opened the door a little wider. "I haven't heard that name in a long time," he murmured. "Who are you?" Mary's hands trembled, but she held her ground. "You know exactly who I am. 40 years ago you delivered my baby at St. Joseph's Hospital." He said nothing. "You told me she didn't survive," she continued, her voice rising. "But I know the truth now. I know she was taken from me." Dr. Campbell's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, she thought he might deny it, but then, to her surprise, he let out a heavy sigh and stepped aside. "Come in," he said. Mary hesitated. Could she trust him? But she had come this far. She couldn't walk away now. She stepped inside. The house was dimly lit, cluttered with old newspapers and forgotten memories. Dr. Campbell moved slowly, lowering himself into a worn-out armchair. "You weren't supposed to find out," he muttered. Mary's breath caught. "So it's true," she whispered. He nodded, rubbing a hand over his face. "It was never personal. Mary, you were young, alone, vulnerable. The perfect target." Her stomach twisted. "Target for what?" he exhaled. "A baby-selling operation. Wealthy families who couldn't conceive. They paid a fortune for newborns, no questions asked. The hospital had connections, doctors, nurses, even adoption officials. Your baby was reassigned." Mary felt like she might be sick. "Where did she go?" she demanded. Dr. Campbell shook his head. "I don't know. Once the babies were placed, our involvement ended. But if you found me, that means you have a name, a lead." Mary clenched her fists. "Her name is Laura, and I won't stop until I bring her home." Dr. Campbell studied her for a long moment, then leaned forward. "Then you need to be careful," he warned. "These people have spent decades covering their tracks. If you start asking the wrong question, you might not like the answers." A chill ran through Mary. She had come looking for the truth. But now she realized someone else might be willing to do anything to keep it buried. Mary left Dr. Campbell's house with her mind spinning. The truth was even worse than she had imagined. Her baby, her daughter, had been sold like a commodity. And now someone out there had spent decades making sure no one ever uncovered the truth. She needed to see Laura. She needed to tell her everything. Fumbling with her phone, she dialed Laura's number. "Laura, it's me. I spoke to him." Dr. Campbell, he admitted everything. There was silence on the other end, then a slow exhale. "What did he say?" "That you were taken from me, that it was part of something bigger, a network of stolen babies." Mary's voice cracked. "I don't know who raised you, but whoever they are, they were never supposed to have you." Laura didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. "Mary, She stopped, hesitating. "I need to see you. There's something I haven't told you." A chill ran down Mary's spine. "So, where are you?" "There's a diner on 5th Street. Meet me there in an hour." Mary didn't hesitate. She got in her car and drove. The diner was nearly empty when Mary arrived. The neon lights flickered, casting a dull glow over the worn-out booths. She scanned the room, her pulse racing, but Laura wasn't there. Mary checked her phone. No messages. No missed calls. Something felt wrong. She walked toward the counter, ready to ask if anyone had seen her, when she noticed a folded piece of paper on the table closest to the door. Her name was written on the front. With shaking fingers, she opened it. "Walk away before it's too late." Mary's stomach turned to ice. She whirled around, scanning the street outside. Was someone watching her? Was Laura in danger? Panic surged through her. She grabbed her phone and dialed Laura's number again. This time it went straight to voicemail. Mary gripped the paper in her hands, her heart pounding. Laura had been the one to call her. She had been the one who wanted to meet. But now she was gone, and someone was warning Mary to stop looking for her. Mary stood frozen in the middle of the diner, the note clenched in her trembling hands. The words echoed in her mind. "Walk away before it's too late." No. She had come too far to stop now. She rushed outside, scanning the street in every direction. Cars passed by, their headlights flashing in the night. Pedestrians moved along the sidewalk, unaware of the storm raging inside her. But Laura was nowhere to be seen. Her hands shook as she dialed Laura's number again. Straight to voicemail. Mary sucked in a breath, forcing herself to think. If someone had intercepted Laura before their meeting, she needed to find out who. There was only one place to start. She climbed into her car and gripped the wheel. If Laura had been taken, or scared into running, Mary had to retrace her steps. She needed to go to Laura's home. The address Laura had given her was a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. But as Mary pulled up to the curb, a chill ran down her spine. The front door was slightly open. Something was wrong. She stepped out of the car, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Slowly she approached the house. The porch light flickered, casting shadows across the wooden steps. "Laura," she called softly. No answer. Mary hesitated for only a second before pushing the door open. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room, its glow barely illuminating the space. Papers were scattered on the floor. A chair was overturned, and then she saw it, a cell phone lying on the carpet. Mary rushed forward and picked it up. The screen was cracked, but when she pressed the power button, the home screen lit up. A missed call from an unknown number. Her stomach twisted. Someone had been here before her. And Laura was gone. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the room. Then her eyes landed on something on the coffee table, a single folded piece of paper. Mary's hands trembled as she picked it up and read the words written in shaky handwriting. "They found me. Don't trust anyone." Her breath caught. Laura had left this message for her. That meant she was still out there, still fighting. But she was running from something. Or someone. Mary's grip tightened on the note. She had one choice. Now find Laura before it was too late. Mary clutched the note in her shaking hands. "They found me. Don't trust anyone." Laura was still alive, but she was running, and whoever had taken her didn't want Mary to find her. But Mary had lost her daughter once. She wasn't about to lose her again. She rushed back to her car, gripping Laura's broken phone. There was one last thing she hadn't checked, her recent calls. Mary swiped through the screen, searching for anything unusual. And then she saw it, a number repeated multiple times in the call log. No name, just digits. Her pulse quickened. If Laura had been trying to reach this number before she disappeared, it had to mean something. She took a deep breath and dialed. The eye. Phone rang once, twice. Then, "Who is this?" a deep voice answered. Mary's grip tightened. "Where is my daughter?" she demanded. A long pause, then a chuckle. "You should have left this alone, Mary." Mary's blood ran cold. "If you've hurt her, she's alive for now, but if you want to see her again, you'll forget everything you think you know." Her heart pounded. "No," she whispered. "I'm not walking away." The voice on the other end sighed. "Then you leave me no choice." The line went dead. Mary's stomach lurched. She didn't know who she had just spoken to, but one thing was clear. Laura was in real danger, and if Mary didn't act fast, she might lose her daughter forever. Hours later, the meeting point was an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Mary's hands trembled as she stepped into the dimly lit space, and then she saw her Laura. She was standing near a stack of crates, her wrists tied, her face pale. But she was alive. Mary's breath caught. "Mom!" The word was barely a whisper. Tears burned Mary's eyes, but before she could take a step closer, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man in a dark suit, his expression cold. "You should have walked away," he said. Mary squared her shoulders. "I want my daughter." The man smirked. "She was never yours to have." A sudden noise, sirens in the distance. The man's smirk faded. Mary's heart pounded. Linda. She had called Linda before coming here. She had told her everything. The sirens grew louder. The man cursed under his breath, then turned to his men. "We're leaving now." The moment they turned, Mary rushed forward, untying Laura's hands. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd never see you again." Mary pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm never letting you go." The warehouse flooded with flashing red and blue lights. Officers swarmed the space, arresting the men who had stolen so many lives. And as Mary held her daughter for the first time in 40 years, she knew one thing. The truth had come at a price. But Laura was finally home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson as Mary sat on her porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. For the first time in 40 years, the unbearable weight in her chest had lifted. Laura sat beside her, staring out at the horizon. They had spent the last few weeks trying to piece together the lost years, stories of a life lived apart, of moments that should have been shared. It wasn't easy. The pain of stolen time lingered. "It still doesn't feel real," Laura murmured. Mary glanced at her daughter. The same brown eyes, the same quiet strength. A lifetime apart, yet somehow they had found their way back. "I know," Mary said softly, "but you're here now, and that's what matters." The truth had come at a cost. The people behind the illegal adoption ring were being investigated, their crimes finally coming to light. Some had fled, others had been caught. Dr. Campbell had turned himself in, his conscience unable to bear the weight of his sins any longer. And Mary? She had spent decades grieving a daughter she thought she had lost. Now she was learning how to be a mother again. Laura reached out, placing a hand over Mary's. "Do you think we can ever make up for all that time?" Mary smiled through the tears welling in her eyes. "We don't have to make up for it," she whispered. "We just have to make the most of what we have now." Laura squeezed her hand, nodding. For the first time in a long, long time, Mary wasn't looking back at what she had lost. She was looking forward, to everything they still had ahead. And that was enough. Did this story keep you on the edge of your seat? There are plenty more where that came from. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss our next gripping tale. Don't just watch, be part of the journey. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more incredible stories.